Hey there guys, I'm SonicGhost and today we're going to be doing an unboxing / review of the PlayStation TV. Now if you're unfamiliar what the PlayStation TV is, the PlayStation TV is a little device that was released by Sony back in 2014 that allows you to emote play with your PlayStation 4 onto another television. Not only that, but the PlayStation TV allows you to play PlayStation Vita, PlayStation Portable, and PlayStation 1 games up on your big screen. Basically, you can think of the PlayStation TV as a PlayStation Vita for your television. Now, I want to go ahead and thank a special friend of mine. You know who you are. Thank you so much, because without you, I wouldn't have been able to pick up a PlayStation TV myself. A friend of mine helped me track down this bundle, and I greatly appreciate it. This PlayStation TV bundle includes a DualShock 3 controller, the LEGO Movie Videogame for the PlayStation Vita, and 8GB memory card for the PlayStation Vita. This here is a great package to get introduced to the PlayStation Vita library, especially with the 8GB memory card, as the PlayStation TV only has 1GB of internal memory. So you're going to want to buy a memory card for this device, and Vita memory cards are not cheap, so I'm glad I got this bundle. If we take a look at the side of the box here, you can see what this is compatible with. You can use this for PlayStation Now, Emote Play for PS4. It also tells you what controllers you can use. You can use either a DualShock 3 or a DualShock 4 with the PlayStation TV. The PlayStation TV does not come with a controller, so you do have to buy the bundle if you want a controller included with it. Otherwise, you're going to have to buy the controller separately. If you take a look at the contents here, it's everything that I mentioned earlier, along with the cables and the manual. So that's what that part of the box is. And then we have this section here, Ready, Set, Play, which tells you can plug it into your TV. You can connect it either by Wi-Fi or Ethernet, and then you can just start playing your games on your television. Simple as that. But now with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and open up the box itself. Now the first thing we see here when we open up this box is we see a DualShock 3 controller. I am very familiar with a DualShock 3 controller as I own a few of these for my PlayStation 3. Like I mentioned earlier, the PlayStation TV does not include a controller, so getting this bundle is very helpful if you don't have a controller to use with the PlayStation TV already. PlayStation TV by itself is about $40, so if you buy a controller separate, that's another $40 to add to it. Now right next to the controller here in the box, we got its USB cable used for charging, and right under that, we have probably the most important thing to me in this bundle outside the device itself, the Vita memory card. This is the 8GB PlayStation Vita memory card. It's very tiny. And this is a proprietary memory card that can be only used with the PlayStation Vita or PlayStation TV. This is why these things are so expensive, as there is no alternative to it. Right after that, we have some paperwork here. We got the LEGO Movie Videogame voucher, so you just enter that into your PlayStation Network and you can download it. And then we have some more paperwork here that goes along with things like the controller and such. But now with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and get to the meat of this unboxing and get to the PlayStation TV itself. Right here in this white box, we have the PlayStation TV sitting right on top. And once we take it out of its packaging, you'll notice immediately that the PlayStation TV is very small. This device just fits in the palm of my hand, that's how small it is. If you look around the side here, you'll see a compartment here for the PlayStation Vita games. So if you got a physical PlayStation Vita game, you just open up the side and you'll insert the game cartridge in there. Now we take a look around the back, we have ourselves all the essentials for the PlayStation TV. You got yourself the power button, the memory card slot for your Vita memory cards, which you can interchange as memory card from your PlayStation Vita into your PlayStation TV. As long as you are using the games that are connected to your PlayStation Network account, they'll work between both devices, which is very nice. We also have the USB slot here in the back. Unfortunately, this will only be used to charge up your controllers and sync them up to the PlayStation TV. This won't allow you to connect a USB drive and let you play videos and movies off of that. You have to stream it to your device, so unfortunately, this is really only good for charging a controller. We also have the HDMI output here and the Ethernet, along with its power plug. I'm glad that this device does include Ethernet, as if you're going to do some heavy streaming, it's always recommended to have a wired connection, so I'm glad that this thing includes it by default. Now for size comparison, since we have a DualShock 3 right here, let's go ahead and take a look at the size differences between the device itself and a controller. And as you can see, PlayStation TV is smaller than the DualShock 3 controller. Like I said, this device is tiny. Now let's go ahead and just unbox the rest of the stuff here. Pretty much everything else now is just wires and other manuals for the PlayStation TV. So here we have the power cord. It has a power supply on the outside, so luckily the PlayStation TV won't get hot, because the power supply being on the inside of a device causes it to get boiling hot. We also have the HDMI cord, and we have the manual for the PlayStation TV. All your basic stuff. It tells you how to set up, your health and safety warnings, pretty much all the stuff you expect from a manual. Simple stuff. But now that we unboxed the device itself, let's go ahead and take a look at what the PlayStation TV can do. So the moment you turn on your PlayStation TV, if you're a Vita user, you'll notice here that the menus are ripped straight from the PlayStation Vita. The menus for the Vita are designed to be used with a touchscreen, and because we don't have any kind of a touchscreen here on the device, it feels a little more clunky. Or at least that's what everyone says, because to me, I don't find the menus all that bad. The worst thing to me about the menus is when you have to close out of a game or program, you have to hold down the circle button, because with the PlayStation Vita you can just swipe away your app, but on the PlayStation TV, because you don't have any touch functionality, you have to hold down the circle button and it'll do the same thing. Other than that, you can go ahead and navigate to different menus using your controller's joystick or D-pad, and it feels pretty nice. I can see why people do complain about this menu interface. It doesn't translate that well to a big screen, but it does the job just fine. But now let's go ahead and take a look what the PlayStation Vita was designed for. Playing games. First up, let's go ahead and talk about how this thing handles as a PlayStation Vita. Now, starting off, you can go ahead and play a good chunk of the PlayStation Vita games on the PlayStation TV. I tried out with a handful of different games I owned along with some demos. I tried out Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed, Retro City Rampage, the LEGO Movie Videogame, and Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, and all games were working perfectly fine. Any game that uses any kind of touch compatibility that is used on the PlayStation TV, since you don't have any kind of way to touch the screen here because there's no touch screen like the Vita, you actually have an emulation option to act as the front and rear touch. If you press in either the right stick or the left stick, you can go ahead and use those to tap the screen. So if you're pressing the left stick, you can touch the front of the screen. If you tap in the right stick, you can tap the bottom screen. You're pressing both the sticks at the same time, and it'll act like you're pressing both the screens. So it is a useful way to get around having no touch screen, but it does feel a little sluggish though. So if you're going to be playing a game that requires you to have fast reflexes with your touch, unfortunately, the PlayStation TV won't do that justice. And because of this, the PlayStation TV is only compatible with a handful of Vita games. It's not compatible with the entire library of Vita games, which is unfortunate, but you can understand why, because the PlayStation TV does not have either touchscreens or a camera. And any game that can use the touchscreens or the camera, it's not going to work one-to-one on the PlayStation TV. Some games that have touch control can translate over to the PlayStation TV, but not all games can do this. I highly recommend, if you're just buying a PlayStation TV to play Vita games, look up a compatibility list online to see what games work and what games don't. You don't want to find yourself buying a game that is not compatible with the PlayStation TV, as you are going to be out of money, since that is going to be incompatible and there's no way to get it to work. Well, with that said, the Vita games I was able to play on here played perfectly fine. They all ran very smooth and they looked very nice. The PlayStation TV has an output of at the most 1080i, but because I'm not a fan of interlaced picture, I play all my games on 720p. The PlayStation Vita itself cannot output at 720p natively. It's close, but it's not full 720p, so any kind of Vita game you're playing here is a little upscaled, so because of that, it won't look as good on the big screen compared to on the PlayStation Vita screen, but these games still look very nice, crisp, and clear, and they do translate over very nicely to the television. All the games that I did play from the Vita library on my PlayStation TV did look very nice on my 32-inch television, and they all play without any kind of controller issues. The DualShock 3 felt very natural for a lot of these games. If you have a DualShock 4, you can go ahead and use the touchpad on there to act as touch controls for at least the front screen. So it would be probably better if you had a DualShock 4 to use with the PlayStation TV if you're playing any kind of games that have somewhat of a touch control. But for me, because I didn't have a DualShock 4, was not able to test this feature, but with the games that I did have that had touch control, it worked well enough for me. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the PlayStation Portable compatibility with the PlayStation TV. The PlayStation Vita is able to play any digital PlayStation Portable game, and because of that, the PlayStation TV can do this as well. I tested this with two games I owned on the PlayStation Portable, which was Mega Man Maverick Hunter X and Tetris on the PSP, and both games played perfectly fine. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Vita is not in HD and so isn't the PlayStation Portable. The PlayStation Portable is an even lower resolution than the PlayStation Vita. Because of this, these games won't look as clean as the Vita games, but nonetheless, these games still looked good on my television. I noticed some jaggies here and there, and for those of you who are not familiar with the term jaggies, pretty much this means you'll see things that aren't as smooth and you see more pixelization in your picture. The other thing I noticed when I was playing PSP games on the PlayStation TV is that some of the text was a little squashed in and lower resolution, but like I mentioned earlier, the PlayStation Portable was not HD, so playing these games in HD resolution doesn't translate 100%. But with the games I did play, they still looked good enough, and I was very fond of playing these games on my big screen. Being able to play games like Mega Man Maverick Hunter X with a PlayStation 3 controller just felt very natural. And I was very, very happy with being able to play PSP games on my television. Last but not least, we come up to the PlayStation 1 games. PlayStation 1 games play perfectly fine on the PlayStation TV. The only thing I noticed about the PlayStation 1 games is since I am a PlayStation 3 owner, I noticed that there's a lack of options when you're playing a PlayStation 1 game in comparison to PlayStation 3. The PlayStation 3 allows you to make multiple memory cards using its virtual memory card system. The PlayStation TV doesn't allow you to do this. It has a similar method, but you have to make sure you have enough space in your memory card, obviously. Luckily though, PlayStation 1 memory cards aren't really that big in size, so you don't really have to worry about these saves taking up too much space on your Vita memory card. So it doesn't work the same way, it's still there. And another thing I noticed is that you can't really do any of the filter options that you can do on the PlayStation 3 for PS1 games. You can't stretch out the picture if you want this to fill your entire screen, and you can't turn on a smooth filter like you can on the PlayStation 3. So the options are a little more limited here. I will be using my PlayStation 3 whenever I'm playing PS1 games in HD like this, but the PlayStation TV did a great job in playing my PS1 games. I tested with Gex Enter Gecko on the PlayStation 1 and it played just like how it did on my PlayStation 3. It looked nice in HD, it played very nice and smooth, and I had no real problems with the game. It played perfectly fine, and this is a great way to get into the PS1 library if you don't have a PlayStation 3. And in fact, if you want to do this on your television, the PlayStation TV is probably the cheapest way to do so, as the PlayStation 4 isn't able to play PlayStation 1 classics on your TV, and PlayStation 3s are more expensive than a PS TV, so this is probably a good way for you to get introduced into the massive library of PlayStation 1 games that's on the PlayStation Network. The last thing I need to talk about here with the PlayStation TV is its remote play feature. This is a feature I was unfortunately unable to test out with the PlayStation TV as I do not own a PS4 myself. I have looked around and asked people who do own both a PlayStation TV and a PlayStation 4 how this feature works, and from what I've been hearing, this feature works perfectly fine. The PlayStation TV allows you to connect to your PlayStation 4 and remote play your games onto another television. It works without any kind of input delay, they still look nice and clean, and it just works as you would expect. Although I do have some experience with some remote play features like this. Steam has a very similar feature where you can go ahead and do in-home streaming, and if you connect to another computer or streaming device, you can go ahead and connect it up to a television or just play on your computer and play a game from a different machine. What I would highly recommend if you do any kind of remote play is you make sure you have the best connection possible whenever you're doing this. So if you are able to connect your PlayStation TV to an Ethernet source, I would highly recommend you do that, as the connection will be much better and it will be more stable because of that. Wireless connections I have always found to be unreliable, and I have problems when I try to stream things with wireless, so if possible I would recommend you get an Ethernet connection. Although from what I've heard, the wireless on here does work perfectly fine for streaming games from the PlayStation 4, so you don't have to worry about that. The only thing I heard about the PlayStation TV's remote play that's a bit of a problem is that if you're trying to stream things like Netflix or Hulu from the PlayStation 4, you're not allowed to do that. So you can't use certain applications from the PlayStation 4 using the remote play on your PlayStation TV, but the games were all working, which is the most important part. Overall, the PlayStation TV is a nice little device for you to get introduced into the PlayStation Vita library. This thing here is a great little tool to be used if you want to play PlayStation Vita games onto your big screen along with PlayStation Portable and PS1 classics. The only thing is, you have to remember, the PlayStation TV is not compatible with all Vita games. So you do have to make sure you look up what games are compatible on the PlayStation TV. And that's unfortunately the biggest drawback about the PlayStation TV. This thing being such an incompatibility with a lot of Vita games turns a lot of people away. This device is dirt cheap nowadays because it didn't sell that well. This device was marketed as a great way for you to play Vita games on the big screen, and when a lot of people learned you couldn't play all your Vita games on the TV, there was no point in buying it, so a lot of people did not buy the device. But for all the games that I did try on the PlayStation TV, they worked without any problems, and they did play perfectly fine on the big screen with a controller. I didn't have any problems playing any of my Vita games on my PlayStation TV. I do wish that the PlayStation TV was compatible with more games. One of the games I was wanting to get for the PlayStation Vita was Uncharted Golden Abyss, and that unfortunately is incompatible with the PlayStation TV, so I still need to buy a Vita to play certain games like Uncharted. So you do have to keep that in mind when you're buying games for the PlayStation TV, and you also have to keep that in mind if you are considering buying a PlayStation TV yourself. But if you're looking at this to play PlayStation Portable and PlayStation 1 games, this device works great for those. I only had a handful of PlayStation 1 games that would not play in the PlayStation TV for some reason, but all the PlayStation Portable games I was looking up and I was trying, they worked flawlessly. I'm not exactly sure why all PlayStation 1 games aren't compatible, because I was having games like Crash Bandicoot 3 and Silent Hill not work, so you do have to keep that in mind. Once again, look up a compatibility chart if you're unsure what games will work, because that will save you a lot of money and frustration. Now, onto the recommendation. This one is very tricky, as I cannot recommend the PlayStation TV to everyone just because of its incompatibility with a lot of games. The PlayStation TV cannot play all Vita games, so it's going to depend on what kind of games you want. Do you want to play the games like Uncharted or Gravity Rush, which uses a lot of the PlayStation Vita's exclusive things, like the touch controls and the camera support? If you do, I would recommend not buying a PlayStation TV and just saving up for a Vita. If you're like me and you're just wanting to play a very small handful of Vita games, then this is a great cheap alternative into playing Vita games. This device is very easy to come by nowadays, and a lot of people who want to play these kind of games will have a controller ready, so as long as you have enough money to get the device itself and then a Vita memory card, you're good to go. But it's going to depend on what you're wanting. If you're wanting to play a lot of Vita games, this may not be a device for you because of its incompatibility. If you're just wanting to get into the digital PSP library like myself, along with some Vita games that is compatible with the PlayStation TV, then I will recommend this. The remote play feature, from what I've seen and heard, does work very nicely as well, but once again, that's a situational thing. Do you think you will use it? Because if so, then I can recommend this device. If you don't think that's going to be useful to you, then you shouldn't get a PlayStation TV. It's just going to depend. But my final verdict on the PlayStation TV is I do enjoy this device a lot. I enjoy being able to play my PlayStation Portable and Vita games on the big screen, and this is a device I know I'll be using a lot in my household. I'll be playing a lot of the portable PlayStation games that are out there. With that all said, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time.